Okay. Thanks everyone for joining us here. I'm excited to have everyone, in my house, working from home, as a lot of people happen to be at this moment in time. Excited to share my thoughts on what problems modern safety managers actually face on a regular basis, and what ones are just the tip of the icebergs. It's something that gets overshadowed by administrative burden in a lot of cases, and what we need to keep in mind is that problems that tend to reveal themselves through peripheral processes or just various mediums of different ways to collect information from the field, they're really just how they're revealing themselves. The underlying problems are much, much larger overall, and we want to make sure that we're tackling what those problems lie, or those problems themselves, versus just trying to put a band-aid over a broken wound or a broken arm. Before we get started, I'll let everyone know that you happen to be muted, but again, feel free to drop any questions in the chat box, and we'll circle back with you offline to get those answered. We have a lot of content in this webinar, and I want to make sure that I address it all in a timely fashion. So with that in mind, I'll let you know who I am and what we're up to. So I'm Ryan Queering. I'm co-founder and CEO of Safety Tech Software. And I got into safety at a very early age. When I was young, very young, my dad worked at a meatpacking facility, and his job was to load trucks with product, and the product happened to be pigs at the time that he was loading it up with. And one day he was loading them into the back of the truck, and for some reason, I'm not sure exactly, but it's almost irrelevant, the equipment that they needed to move them was broken or busted, and so it was uncommissioned or off commission. So he needed to continue loading the actual product onto the trucks itself so that they could get the shipments moving. Otherwise, there had been repercussions in the supply chain. And so their instruction to him was just to get it done. And as a 22-year-old man, that's what he did. And without any other notification of what the risks happened to be, he didn't have any of that identified for him. And so all it really took was one larger pig, after hundreds of previous ones that he had loaded, to crush his vertebrae in his lower back and put him in the hospital. And so this was back in the 80s, and life was interrupted from then on. And I've been able to witness firsthand how a workplace injury can actually affect a family unit for a long time. And now he's into his 60s, and he's had to deal with chronic pain for his entire life. And of course that comes into our lives when we try to do travel or try to enjoy things as a family. There's always that consequence that we have to face. And so that is one of the driving forces for me to try to make an impact on this industry, making sure people go to work, complete their jobs that they're really good at, and then can go home in the same condition, if not even better, having gotten the blood pumping a little bit through some manual labor. So that's where I'm coming from, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen to that story, because it's something I'm passionate about. This brings me to Safety Tech. Craig and I founded Safety Tech with the purpose of supporting workplace safety, and by doing that, we want to simplify mandatory processes and engage in a positive safety culture, ultimately reducing the carbon footprint. And we both worked in the field, and we know firsthand how safety is viewed by plenty of workers that are out there. Craig worked as a construction safety officer for years and was constantly battling the field workers' views on what safety is and who it's for and why we need to have this stuff completed. And the conclusion that we were able to find was that most workers feel that safety is really not for them. They feel that it's for the company or the government, and that they just need to do it to get it off their plate as a liability waiver to say, yeah, I know that my job is risky. I understand that I could get hurt doing this job, as opposed to an exercise in protecting themselves and their colleagues. And so we wanted to change that stigma, because we feel like it's not accurate. It's being painted a picture that isn't realistic. So in this webinar, what I want to really do is talk about what we've found the problem with safety happens to be. I want to talk to the roots of safety, where it came from, and why we have it in place today. And this is not going to be news to you guys. I just want to kind of set the foundation for the talk that we're going to be going through over the next 30 to 40 minutes. What is digital paper and how is, why it's not really equipped to solve the problems that we're going to be looking at today, and what can data actually do for safety managers. This is a question. Like, data is such a generic term, and I want to show what some of the actual practical uses of data can be to reinforce a positive safety culture, and then go through those use cases that our clients use on a regular basis. And by the end, I was hoping to do just a quick summary of what we're doing, and if there happens to be time, we might be able to address a question or two, but likely we'll take those questions offline and meet up with you guys after the fact and answer them upon delivery of the deck and the video of this. All right, on to the first slide. The problem with safety. So safety doesn't really have a paperwork problem at all. I mean, that's the tip of the iceberg. That's where people are viewing it as, but it's not really paperwork. It's a perception problem, and it results in non-compliant behavior, which then brings safety managers to lose sleep over field worker buy-in and reporting to regulatory authorities and delivering value to stakeholders such as the executive or management team of an organization. And these 3 points align with the current state of safety management in 2020. And then the COVID-19 pandemic has certainly compounded a lot of these issues, and it hasn't really made it a lot easier to implement safety by any means. And so when we talk to safety professionals in all types of organizations around specific problems that they face, the field worker buy-in is the struggle to motivate workers to complete safety documentation on time before starting work. We want to get rid of the retroactive form submissions, the Friday afternoon coffees where they complete Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday's safety documentation, just so that they have it done to keep people from questioning them. Keeping up with regulatory compliance, there's a constant evolution and change in regulatory authorities' direction in how to complete things. And we want to make sure that when it comes to an external audit or of an organization's safety system or a safety program, we don't want you losing sleep over that. And when we solve the real problem underlying behavior, we're able to just make sure that you're auditable anytime you want. Delivering value to stakeholders as safety professionals are constantly challenged to bring more value. They're viewed quite often as a cost center, and we want to flip that switch into an ROI type of relationship so that people are able to understand what money's going into safety, but then more importantly, have the measurement systems in place that we can tell you how you're generating more value on the output, and then that helps you get more budget and larger contributions to the overall organization itself. So those are the 3 big problems that are underlying, of course, that fall out from behavioral issues that we want to solve ultimately. And so it's funny when you speak about the roots of safety, because when I just talked about how safety is viewed today in the field, the roots of safety are actually worker driven. It's the health and safety regulations kind of started out with workers unions lobbying to make workplaces safer for employees. It's like a grassroots movement, not anything from corporate saying, oh, we want to make sure that we don't hurt or injure anybody on site. It was we don't want to go to work and get injured. So it's kind of odd how that's flipped at this point in time. After they won the right to refuse unsafe work, workers in high-risk sectors like mining and oil and gas and construction needed to know that they were allowed to decline it. And then that gave them a little more power. And then organizations were held accountable to ensure that staff members were safe and insured in case of an incident that happened, because this is all built in lessons learned over the history of modern work in the industrial area. And today now, regular audits and random inspections are the enforcement tools that all of these regulators have to make sure that everything's being completed. And that's kind of all that they really can do at this point in time is fine and penalize, but that's their systems that they can implement. So what is digital paper? Systems that harness apps or actual paper or just store electronic versions of the paperwork. And these systems can be things like Google Docs, for example, or simple apps on your phone that send out PDFs, or single user apps that don't really store any information in a structured database. They just create a PDF of that document and ship it off. Information on the safety forms, though, they tend to be locked and in structured formatting. And so the only way that you can extract information from paper or from digital paper is by actually reading it. While digital paper tends to solve the problem of the paperwork issue, it amplifies the administrative burden, and that's placed on safety managers. So, for example, the analogy that I like to make is if you could imagine a stack of 100 safety forms on your desk. While it may seem daunting to have to go through it all, it's likely going to be faster for you to skim through the pieces of 100 pieces of paper on your desk than it would be to actually open up 100 PDFs and comb through them on your desk. That's likely, or comb through them on your monitor itself. You have way more room. You have your desk you can spread out over. You can flip through paper much faster than flipping through screens on your computer itself. So systems that you harness and leverage digital paper tend to just not work at all. So right before we get into the core of the presentation here, the meat and potatoes of it, so to speak, I just wanted to do a quick poll and ask if any the attendees here have actually used or leveraged a digital system in the past or today. So if we've got everyone to the poll here. Well, what we want to do is we want to go through and you know, as we speak to IT professionals and HR and safety directors who've attempted to implement digital apps in the past, a lot of times they get abandoned due to a lack of adoption in the field or lack of actual information flow. Many apps they're great for firms with 10 to 25 employees, but when you start to add up the workers, you know, past that 100-point mark, they slowly start to break down. Is what we find is the value gets cluttered or lost in the enhanced or exacerbated administrative burden. So larger companies, they also need to worry about fragmentation as they're running multiple business units. One business unit may use one app and another one might use a separate app, and then they got to figure out, well, how do we harmonize everything? How does this all come together at this point in time? And so it can be a daunting task as well in trying to make sure that you have a unified safety mission, and it becomes difficult to stick to if you have multiple systems doing multiple things. So yeah, I've gone to the poll now here. It looks like, just want to see, we'll leave that up for a little bit and make sure everyone can have an opportunity to answer it. It's going digital certainly at this point in time isn't anything new, but it's definitely emerging technology now at this point in time. We're seeing a lot of advancements happening around what types of apps you can implement. And you know, health and safety happens to be such a large problem that okay, we're going to close the poll now. It looks like most people have answered. Yeah, perfect. So many people have had exposure to a digital system in the past. Great to see, because what I'd like to do is just, you know, maybe even after the webinar itself is chat about, you know, what did you like about it, what didn't you like about it, because a lot of people will, hopefully what I'm saying is making a lot of sense too, in the sense that just having digital paper isn't helping anything. On that note, let's continue on. So what can data provide that's different than digital paper or paperwork or the traditional methods of implementing safety? So how does that data make an impact on the three challenges that I mentioned earlier? So solving field worker buy-in, moving away from manual paper-based or digital paper systems can remove the administrative burden, and that weighs field workers down. The field workers don't take paperwork seriously, and it's unfortunate, but it's just the case that it is. It's not that they're not serious about safety or that they're wanting to get hurt, it's that they're not great administrators, and keeping track of paper burdens them to the point of negligence. So introducing technology allows you to open up a new narrative around safety, and one that moves away from archaic processes and into and it can signal to them that you're listening. You understand that you don't want them to be providing paperwork to you anymore. That's not the purpose of safety, but let's collect this information using technology now at this point in time. We're able to kind of stay ahead of regulatory compliance. And so once the field level data collection starts to happen through the app itself into a data system, manual creation of missing or lost documents becomes a thing of the past. That retroactive submission no longer occurs. And this means that you can pass an audit at any time because you don't have to worry about compliance. It's focusing on performance of safety. You know, focusing your energy on the non-compliant workers within your organization, and even, you know, automate some of those follow-ups so that you don't have to worry about non-compliance, and it allows us to see that we tend to listen to automated reminders instead of a human. What I'm trying to paint the picture of is when you are told to do something by somebody else in your organization, it's usually met with confrontation, and people don't like to be told what to do. But when it's a system reminding them, it's the system nudging them, it's a little more easier to take in. And then delivering value to stakeholders, as referenced above, the time focus is an asset. In normal operations, manual-based paper processes, you're so busy responding to incidents and chasing documentation that there isn't much time for planning and measuring and coaching workers. And how you can deliver or prove that there is value in safety when you don't have any time to measure anything. So we want to turn safety from that cost center into investment by highlighting where your knowledge and expertise is needed so that you can provide as much value as you possibly can to the organization. We found that once an organization implements a proper platform, a proper EHS software platform, they can discover exactly where safety is getting performed, and more importantly, where is it not getting performed, and what do you need to do to create a plan to correct non-compliant behavior. And that's where data really shines at that point in time. So let's dive into some of the use cases that I'm going to talk through in this webinar here itself. So staying on top of compliance, I'll get into each of the details of these use cases individually, but here as a summary, here they are. Identifying good and rewarding good behavior, so important to get that kudos out there. Increasing your productivity with less resources and with higher demand. We always want to try to increase productivity, and we want to do that efficiently and not through laborious means. Sending out updates on safe work practices. This seems like such a mundane task or a simple thing to do, but it can be a full-time job in and of itself, just making sure people understand what the updates happen to be. Reduce workplace incidents, respond to events faster, plan upcoming training, track your external workers, trending engagement with safety, that's so important. Increase quality control and compare best practices. And then of course, ultimately what we're trying to do is create a culture of safety excellence. And imagine having the ability to plan your day, week, month, year around safety initiatives that matter, that contribute to a safety culture, and that deliver reports highlighting what these initiatives, whether they were successful or if they failed. I mean, it can be both, and it can be successful in both ways. If you have an initiative that failed, you know that you have a foundation to work from at that point in time. If you have an initiative and it was successful, keep doing more like that. And it's got more information that you can digest, the better you can ultimately get at completing. And as knowledge workers, we have this embedded data or embedded knowledge in each of our brains that we want to be able to bring to the forefront. And when you're buried in administrative burden and chasing documentation, it's impossible to actually provide that knowledge to your staff. So we want to make sure that we're not chasing paper anymore, and we're able to deliver actual value. And our mission is to reverse that trend. So let's jump into it. Staying on top of compliance. Compliance is certainly a focal point for safety professionals, and it's because it's traditionally the most monitored metric that we have in the field. And sometimes it becomes the only real metric in measuring success. And unfortunately, being compliant doesn't necessarily mean that everyone's safe. It just means that we have the documentation to back up an audit. Staying on top of compliance is having the ability to make micro corrections to the way that safety is being performed. And those corrections, they don't reveal themselves without the appropriate information funnel. And so if you don't have the data coming to you, you can't make a micro correction, because quite often you'll get dumped a week's worth or a month's worth of safety documents onto your desk or into a folder, and then you got to try to make decisions from that. And it's already, a lot of these decisions that you want to make, it's too late. You have this information too late. So we want to make sure that we're creating an efficiently utilized pipeline. So some examples of what a micro correction could look like. It's a simple real-time feed, which can deliver enough information to you so that you know who has and who hasn't completed their safety documentation for the day. And it's like shining a spotlight into a dark corner so you can observe what's happening and then make a plan. Switch the focus metric away from compliance and into performance. And that way your organization is going to be performing safety successfully, and compliance just happens to be the byproduct of safety performance. So that's ultimately what we're trying to do. And accountability is what maintains that system. The sheer fact that your workforce knows that you're getting a real-time feed of what's happening at the field level is something that is so powerful that you cannot get with a lot of these other systems that exist out there, especially paperwork. That is certainly something that that paperwork doesn't strive to complete or to be good at all. But it's ultimately, we want to affect that behavior through real-time results. Speaking of behavior, we want to identify, not only do we want to affect behavior, but we want to identify and respond and reward to good behavior. The same theme as safety performance and accountability. Having the insights to be able to detect good behavior from your workforce can go a long way in reinforcing an underlying safety culture that you're trying to build. People respond to positive reinforcement, and sometimes all it takes is a text message to say, hey, great job. I read your hazard assessment today, fantastic. They're small but influential, and they're details that we want to help build safety champions within your organization. And so building out a grassroots safety champions network within your organization can help reinforce this good behavior across the board to the rest of the staff that exist out there. And quite often, that's what's going to happen is people are going to notice these behaviors, and they're going to notice that they're being positively reinforced. And so once you have identified your safety champs, you can spend time on coaching the unengaged and creating more safety champions within your organization. And that, using your experience of years of experience to inform and create new champions is something that is of value that you can bring to your organization to help deliver even more value itself. Productivity. So again, safety managers are always asked to do more with less, and it's a trend that isn't going to stop at any time, unfortunately. So what we want to do is make sure that you have the powers and the tools that you need in order to actually do more with less, and that is by increasing your productivity, getting you out of the realm of what I call firefighting, and I'll mention that a little bit later on as well, but into the realm of actually producing. It's something that we all talk about and we really enjoy, but for the most part, before using a system, if you're using paper, 80% of your time is spent collecting or chasing down those safety submissions. And so if you can enter that information into whatever type of digital system, be it a spreadsheet or Access database or some sort of dashboarding system. Unfortunately, the frustrating part about doing that is that the remaining 20% of your time isn't necessarily spent on applying decisions that you're trying to make after entering that data into a spreadsheet or some sort of dashboarding system. It's spent on responding to emergencies or again, that firefighting, the firefighting kind of mantra where we have an inspector going on here, you got a stop work over here, now you got somebody getting injured over here, and you're not able to actually do anything but respond. And we're trying to expose that. And so once you have a system exposing the data that you're able to flip your time allocation, is what we've found is most people are able to then say, okay, I'm going to stop this 80% of data collection and I'm going to flip it, where 80% of my time now is spent on initiatives and on performing planned out work and not responding to fires. Those fires are still going to exist, but they're slowly going to start dissipating over time. I have a story here that I'd like to talk about. One of our clients early on, this is back in 2016. She was a safety coordinator and she used to go on a rotation visiting active projects on a weekly basis. And so some visits were great, but most were not. Most were quite bad, to be totally honest. So when she would arrive on site, none of the documentation was ready. So she'd have to round up the troops to make sure that everyone could come together to have a safety meeting so we could identify the hazards that exist today and confirm which subcontractors were on site. And it turned into what should have been a 15-minute visit. It turned into hours long, because it's not just a matter of filling out a document, it's about getting everyone engaged in that meeting itself. And so once she would hit the first site, it would completely derail her entire day. At that point in time, none of the things that she'd planned on completing were ever going to get completed. She could hit maybe 1 or 2 sites in a day, and then that was it. When she started using the system, I remember talking to her, she would arrive at the office and spend about 30 minutes reviewing what's already been completed. So having that insight into what's going on in the field. Then she'd arrive on site, and it would not be to rally the troops to get them to submit documentation. It's just confirming what she's already read at the office. So at the same time, she's texting the people who hadn't completed anything yet to let them know that, hey, get your stuff in before I arrive on site. But being able to show up on site and just analyze and review what's already in her mind from the documentation that she got at the office, it was able to create a more efficient and positive interaction between her and the site employees. Then she could review the newly submitted forms after her site visit from her car or truck or whatever she happened to be in before she left the previous site so that she could move on to the next one. And so that one use case allowed her to routinely visit every single site, every single project every week, which was viewed as impossible prior to having the data up front. And so eventually crews got the hint and they started performing these tasks just on time because they knew that this new cadence was, she's going to show up on site every single week. Let's make sure that we have all our documentation in order. And so that's one way that we were able to increase productivity through a system like this. Update work practices. This is something that's can be really easy or really hard depending on your workforce itself. Ensuring that you have a trained workforce can pose, a substantial hurdle depending on how complex the scope of work happens to be. But through emailing, texting, and phone calls, and ensuring your workforce knows about an updated policy, it can be a full-time job. That might be your entire week, trying to get that up to speed. And if we're honest with ourselves, it may not ever be 100%. Unfortunate truth is that we got to accept that. But with technology and the proper data, it becomes a lot more effective. So now instead of being a 40-hour job or a 50-hour job, it's something that you can build and roll out and then track at that point in time, a little more passively as opposed to actively. So now keep in mind that I'm talking about safe work practices on this slide specifically, but it applies to SDSs and updates to training, or even in the case of COVID, for example, an update to the sanitization station locations, just making sure that everyone's aware of what's happening. Source control of information documentation or important documentation is a big problem. And it's not just for the safety industry, but this problem has usually been solved by having one physical copy of a master document that resides inside of a master binder, and it's on a bookshelf at head office. And distributing the source material becomes a means of photocopying or scanning and emailing it out to try to get people to read it or ingest it or consume the content that you're building for it. And with a digital system, what we found is our clients are able to update a safe work practice, distribute it directly to a targeted worker role or a specific project that needs it, or even specific users or a cohort of users. And then they're able to monitor the engagement, such as what is the open rate? How much time did they spend on that document? Who's completed it? And then once that's done, it removes almost the entire 40 hours of time that you've had to spend previously on a regular basis, so that you can place your focus on the individuals who haven't engaged. You can see exactly what's happening, or maybe the individuals who engaged, but they only spent 10 seconds on it and they marked it completed. Did they really understand what they were reading, and have they really digested or consumed that information? And then when things change, you can arrive at the old version, you can archive it, and then push out the latest update in the same way, notifying everybody that there is this small change. And then just keeps it much easier to be able to keep these things updated and have your workers in the field be informed, as opposed to some of the archaic ways of distributing documentation, which to no fault of anybody listening, it just happens to be the way that it was. We want to try to reduce workplace incidents. Now, implementing a solution for safety to open up the ability to measure leading indicators is a signal to a workforce that management have now invested in resources to making sure that they stay alive or stay safe. It's one of the first things that needs to happen so that everybody knows that safety is important. That top-down investment in safety is such a signal, such a strong signal, that we want to make sure workers recognize that there's been a monetary value associated to this, and there's been a time investment from the team's perspective, and it's big. It's a big investment, and that's surely one of the first talking points that you want to bring up. But once you've been able to do that, and once they recognize that the leadership team of the organization views safety as important and not as just a government checkbox, that's when you can have a dynamic change within your organization itself. Trailing indicators like metrics like total recordable incident rate and days away from work, Those indicators are a great picture into how safety was performed historically, but they don't paint a whole picture. It's just a past picture itself. But once you can start measuring leading indicators and monitor what those look like, such as toolbox talk frequency or safety engagement just in general, we can start to measure the effect of the investment. So we spent this amount of money. What is it gaining us? What's the level of what's the return on our investment? Ultimately, this leads to a decrease in workplace incidents because you're able to start to get ahead of some of these lagging indicators, like the total recordable incident rate, for example. So that's how we have found that we were able to reduce workplace incidents. And by keeping safety top of mind for your workforce, by working on altering that behavior around safety and that the way safety is perceived at the field level is the first step that we find is, and almost the biggest ROI happens at that point in time. Having people submit daily documentation into an app itself, where you can ingest it at an office level, or if you happen to be working from a home office, you can do it from there too. We've proven that that's been able to reduce workplace incidents by about 85%, and so that hits your workers' productivity as well, and that's huge rebates on insurance and everything. And it's all kind of boils down to ultimately a better safety culture. That's actually giving you the ROI itself. The app is just the foundational piece that starts the conversation. I can feel that this one's pretty self-explanatory. Having notifications come on with respect to events occurring in the field can enable you to start a plan instantly. And I'm positive that we've all been in the position at one point in time where we wished we'd known about something just a little bit sooner. And having that would have allowed us to put a fix in place before something could blow out of proportion. Safety, and speaking with safety management, quite often when a new project gets launched, for example, it's depending on your organization itself, but speaking from a general contractor in construction, when a new project gets launched, safety is usually the last person to know about it because they've been doing project planning, they've been doing all the prep work and allocating resources and doing all of this extra work. And then, oh yeah, we got to make sure that we have a safety person to come and monitor this site, this project, while we're working through it. And then, unfortunately, without designing the pre-plans with safety in mind, what ends up happening is it gets forgotten about and neglected. And then you're busy trying to put band-aids in place to make sure that everything's covered from a safety perspective. But being able to identify when a new project gets created instantly can notify and alert you so that you can go and approach the project manager, because it's not like they're doing this on purpose. They're just forgetting to bring you into the loop, or forgetting to bring the safety team into the loop itself right off the kickoff. And so being involved from a project from the early stages can certainly help evolve what safety gets viewed as long-term. And that's what we found is by tying in or putting project managers into a safety platform allows them to go in and create a new project and get all of the documentation that they're going to need in place prior, and involve safety in the early stages so that it can be addressed later on. So that's just having information. It allows you to actively provide value and not be constantly chasing your tail, so to speak. Trending engagement and safety. I talk a lot about safety engagement because this is ultimately the boiler. If you were to boil down all of these problems, that safety engagement is one of the core ones. We really just want people to understand what safety is, because it's a grassroots-led movement from the workers to make sure that they don't get hurt on site. Identifying the gaps in participation is what every one of us is trying to accomplish on a regular basis. We're searching for things, and we need searching for everything that we need in order to complete the whole picture. We have it with paperwork and with digital systems that provide digital paper. We find that there's a huge information gap, and it takes a lot of time to fill it in manually. And humans just aren't great at doing that, but systems are, and computers are, and that's why they're so important today. Having a data pipeline that enables the information flow directly to you instantly can help you massively. And while we all have our hunches that we work off of on a regular basis, without any measurement, we're really not able to attribute the efforts that we make to solving the hunches that we created. And so we just want to put things in place where we can start to confirm our hunches in order to deliver more value and make sure that that our workforce is engaged and that they are able to complete these things on time, because that's ultimately what we're trying to do is keep people safe, keep people understanding that safety is for them, increasing productivity on site, making sure that they're able to complete their jobs without a work stoppage or an unplanned work stoppage, and ultimately reduce that trend of workplace injuries. Quality control. So reviewing anomalies or even letting your workforce know that you do in fact review these documents can go a long way into quality control. And quality control it's a pretty big topic, and I'm going to just kind of comb it down into a few select pieces. But locating out of the ordinary submissions can allow you to locate risk and correct it before something bad can happen. That combined with source control and required processes or policies ensures that people are consuming the correct information and they're not conflicting on site. And so having two people understanding a safe work practice in different ways, or one person on a different version than the other, can be even more risky than not having the information at all in some cases, because it can create animosity on site. And watching how people interact with your safety forms, because all too often there can be misinterpretations happening there too, where they don't understand the question that you're asking of them, and so from there you're able to digest that information, review it from a quality standard standpoint, and then make changes if you need to. And those changes doesn't have to be changes to the form itself. It can be, certainly, but it can be changes to maybe the person doesn't understand something, you need to go and speak to them really quick, and it can be a 5-minute phone call as opposed to having to figure out more, or getting late information and then understanding that everything's inaccurate and it's going to impact your overall compliance, or you know, closing the loop on you know, corrective actions, making sure that that from an audit perspective or a quality perspective, things are actually being completed and not left to out in the wind, so to speak. You know, being able to shortlist these out of the ordinary submissions can certainly help with maintaining your level of compliance or level of training on site as well, and who actually knows what they're doing and who doesn't, because the green hats, so to speak, the newer people on site may need to be kept under their wing for a little bit longer, but you can confirm when they start to understand things. So having that quality control process in place is very, very beneficial. Planning upcoming training, another obvious one here, or self-explanatory. Being able to dive in and view your expiring safety certificates in one place can enable you to build an appropriate training program and send cohorts of staff, not just a single staff member, but cohorts of staff to training sessions, or even bringing the trainer to you if you have enough of a large enough cohort. Now, of course, with COVID restrictions, we're limited to size that we can build, but like talking longevity, being able to have a classroom of 30 people come in and have one cohort get all their CPR training, get all their confined space training that they need in order to get up to speed and compliant, is certainly more efficient than responding to expired training as it's expiring, or even a little bit after. And so understanding that the value in that is huge, but on paper-based systems can often be overlooked, or it can create new fires for you to have to try to put out. Also, understanding the gaps that exist in your workers' training profiles. While this seems like it's obvious, but when you onboard a new staff member, of course, the first step they do is they take out all their training certificates and you photocopy them and then you file them. But unfortunately, you don't get any notifications, or you don't get alerted to anything that exists in your file cabinet. You have to be constantly on top of that stuff, or you're setting alerts in your calendar, or some other asynchronous method of getting this information to yourself on a regular basis. And that can be there's a lot of room for error in that, and again, it can help create more fires that you need to put out on a regular basis. So understanding what those gaps look like and storing it on a proper system that alerts you to expiring certificates can allow you to plan your training and make sure that everything's up to speed, and then you have a regular cadence. Go from there. And tracking external users, one of the final use cases here. External users for your organization are usually the highest risk individuals that need to be monitored, and this is just coming from anecdotal information. And if you look at some of the ABC's documentation around this, remote workforces that you leverage subcontractors are 670% more likely to have a workplace incident on a regular basis. And so, yeah, take a look at that report if you ever get a chance to. But the highest risks individuals, you can't monitor them appropriately using paper or digital paper itself. The insight gets lost because you're not able to determine when safety forms are actually being filled out, and more importantly, when tasks are actually being completed. And so comparing, or what I'm trying to say is you lose the connection to the field when you don't have a data pipeline flowing in where you can actually monitor these things. You be sure they submit the documentation to you on some sort of cadence, and it could be weekly, it could be monthly, depending on the project term and length. But what it ultimately ends up happening is they get pushed aside because they're not part of your umbrella, although they still impact your staff on site. And we want to make sure that everyone stays safe. And so tracking these external users can be a really big value add to your overall organization. So, and even using that data to compare subcontractors to each other can help you determine which contractors you should bring back for the next project or for the next thing that needs to be completed on the job site, and which ones should be cut. You can dial in on non-compliant contractors this way and reduce your overall operational risk. And this can help you also with some of your negotiations on how much should be charged for work that needs to be done. So really, really powerful being able to add in external users into the system and start tracking their day-to-day usage of safety and how engaged are they actually in safety processes and safety protocols. Comparing best practices in safety. So this is something that we're finding to be more and more valuable every single day. If you have different safety managers, different project managers, you have different regions even within your organization itself, depending on how large you are, or even just different crews. If you wanted to style that down, and we have these cohorts or user groups or crews, whatever you want to call them, within an organization. What do they look like side by side? So measuring what the performance of the different groups can help you determine what is successful in one and what is or what has been detrimental to another, and identifying potentially toxic protocols or toxic policies or toxic individuals in those cohorts or those crews can help you either get rid of them or send them to training or coach them, or there's so many things you can do once you have the information in front of you. Embracing the changes and creating a new policy can help as well, because if you have just one crew that's just bang on every single day, they rarely have an incident, and when they do, it's responded to appropriately. They know what to do. You can take what those best practices that crew is performing and start to build policy around it so that you can get and bring up everyone else from there. As if you could consider a spectrum of performance or engagement and safety, you want everyone to be on the leading edge of that spectrum itself, and doing everything that you possibly can to enable that is certainly a value proposition all in and of itself. And that is what we can measure and perform. Put them side by side, see what's the differences, and try to identify what nuanced differences there actually is. And what we're all here for, of course, is creating a culture of safety excellence. So safety excellence is something, again, if you don't have championing from the top down, it's very difficult to ingrain or embed that into your culture, into your company culture. So it has to be something from the management level. And again, that investment in a safety platform can certainly be one of the biggest signals to your workforce to show that you guys take it seriously. This is something that we need to accomplish. This is something that needs to be done, and here's how we're doing it. And we're listening. We recognize that field workers, you guys, you work great with your hands. You know how to do practical work in the real world, but you're not great administrators, which is fine. You don't have to be anymore. And so showing them that you're listening is also goes a long way when creating a safety culture of itself. But mostly measuring these leading indicators and delivering a world-class safety system. And by safety system, I don't mean software or a platform. I mean a system as in a group of policies and procedures. Being able to deliver that on a regular basis without burning yourself out is what we are noticing that we're able to do and to help with safety managers. Having the ability to push out daily toolbox talks and not have to worry about the planning and the delivery of that toolbox talk itself, because I know how much effort goes into that. And I did a whole webinar just on how much effort goes into preparation for toolbox talks itself. That can be a full-time job in and of itself, if not more, depending on how big your organization happens to be. So little things like that, like measuring these leading indicators, closing the loop on corrective actions, embracing your safety champions and rewarding them, but then also making sure that you're paying attention to the negligent or the unengaged and bringing them up to speed to match that of your safety champions themselves. That's ultimately how you create the foundations to build your safety culture at that point in time. So that's all the use cases that we're speaking about. In the end of the webinar itself, I just want to summarize quickly here. You know, it's a lot of information, and we went through it relatively quickly. The slides and the video are going to be made available to you later, so you can if there's something that you wanted to just review or go back to, feel free. You'll have that all available to you at some point in time. But the important takeaways are that, you know, paper isn't really the problem. And, you know, if we had unlimited time and resources, we'd be able to extract the same value in a lot of cases as what I was talking about. It's just we don't have it. It doesn't exist. We're not going to have teams of 15, 20, 50 people. We don't have unlimited safety professionals ready to go and monitor things on site on a regular basis, especially in a pandemic. And so we want to make sure that we're opening up the insights through technology, leveraging technology to do more with less. You know, safety started, just keep in mind, it started as a workers movement, a grassroots workers movement to say, hey, we deserve the right to not get hurt while we're performing a job task. That got lost. It's muddied along the way, but I feel like people just need to be reminded of that. It's so important. You know, be cautious of digital paper and apps that brag about digital paper, or that say that they're solving your problem by removing paperwork. That's not going to solve your problem. It's going to amplify your problem and inundate you with even more digital clutter, and it's going to be even more difficult for you to solve problems because your data is going to be locked on PDFs instead of paper, or data is going to be cluttered in an email inbox instead of in a database or a formatted way of extracting that information. You know, safety data can really be used for anything. What do you want to measure? And then just work backwards from there. What are the key things that impact that measurement, or what are the key things that I need to do in order to reinforce this initiative? And so just thinking about, you know, while we're talking about safety data, it's really just having insights. And then ultimately, we want to reinforce a culture of safety excellence, and that's what we're really trying to achieve with our mission. Is let's make these mandatory processes as simple and easy as possible to interact with. Let's create that safety culture of excellence within our workforces, so that everyone's aware of what safety is meant to do and how, and then, you know, leverage the technology to do more with less. And so on that note, what I'd like to do is invite everyone to go and actually we give the system away for free. We have a free forever release, which is to get you set up and running quickly within, you know, a small use case. You want to test out going or transforming your safety policy or safety program from paper to digital. This is a great chance to do that. You can go in, pick 3 safety forms, and then start rolling them out within your workforce to find out what that adoption looks like and what that data is going to ultimately look like for you. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate you coming out.